What up, guys? Welcome to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Today we have a friend of mine back again, one of my buddies, and many of you guys who have followed me on the YouTube channel long enough, and if you've listened to the podcast long enough, he was here before. Um, he is my air quotes little brother named Chad. So he's not my actual little brother. Sometimes people think he's like my real little brother. He's just my little brother through sweat and tears and training, right? But he is currently down in Nashville, or right outside of Nashville, in a place called Murfreesboro. And we have him on the podcast today, and we'll talk about something he's going through. So he had kind of an interesting injury that I've seen a couple times in jiu-jitsu. And obviously it can happen from other things, but I think that it's one of those injuries from jiu-jitsu that can cause from rounding your back all the time and being in like inverted positions. I don't know this for a fact,
compression, getting your neck cranked,
just getting
on.
crushed up all the time. And so it's one of those reasons why when people talk to me about invert, I'm not really the biggest proponent of inverting. I know for competitive purposes, it can be really useful. And there are some times that I'll play around with it, but I don't use inversion in the sense of when I get into those crunched up positions, and partly because of the injuries that it can do to your neck and everything else. And I know that someone will say, well, Mikey Musumeci, because this is what happened one time. Someone said, well, Mikey Musumeci says that if you do it this way, it doesn't actually hurt your neck. Fair enough. Talk to me in 20 years. It's like, it's when you're young, it's like you can get away with a lot of stuff. You start to get older, and, again, sometimes we can look at our elders and say, man, whatever, you don't know what you're talking about. But sometimes there's some wisdom there. And, talk to me about some of these guys that have been training for 20 plus years and show me the ones that really just love inverting. I don't know of any. Like, a lot of them are like, man, I got to save my neck, because, jiu-jitsu does take a toll on your neck and back. I mean, everybody's neck and back is a little jacked up sometimes, just from living, let alone having people crush you. So anyway, with that said, we're going to get into today's podcast with Chad, talk about that injury and just talk about some random stuff with him. And again, he's a tough black belt. If you guys are ever down in the Nashville, Murfreesboro area, definitely check out his gym. He's a good dude and love him to death. And so it's good to see that he's doing well. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. You guys have listened to the podcast long enough and you've heard me talk about CBD supplements. Again, supplements are one of those things where it's the cherry on top. It's the extra, right? Supplements are not going to completely overhaul the way you feel. Like we were having an interesting conversation the other day with one of the guys in my gym who started doing the Eli programming for his diet.
Yep.
And he was talking about, man, the craziest thing is that I don't feel inflammation in my body. My knees don't hurt. My back doesn't hurt. Like, yeah. And again, it wasn't because they cut out carbs or because they cut out all meats or because they cut, because a lot of times when people go on these hardcore elimination diets, they say, oh my God, I feel amazing. Well, yeah, because you cut out all this like sugar and processed garbage, right? That's the problem. It wasn't the carbohydrates. If you got carbohydrates from, say, potatoes and rice and vegetables and fruits, you'd be fine.
Yep.
But you're getting them from bad sources. And I don't want to say bad sources, but sources that you should not be eating every single day. Likewise, when you start eating in a better way, all of a sudden you feel better. And so, that kind of stuff is really important for a lot of you guys that are, that geek out on recovery. Things like diet, sleep, not drinking too much, all those things, giving yourself time to rest. Like I messed up yesterday, and, I can always tell when I'm overtrained because I push myself too hard and I work too hard throughout the day and I don't give myself enough time to decompress. And it's really hard for me to sleep. And last night I didn't get to sleep till about 3:30 and woke up at about 7:30 and had to go, so again, anyway, with that said, one of the supplements that I do like to throw into the mix for recovery is CBD. I think it's something that's helped me out, both with the balms, when I need like a little bit of site specific help, like on my neck sometimes, like when I came back from team training, my neck was a little jacked up, took a shower, rubbed the balm on it, but also the tinctures. I use the tinctures when I go to sleep at night to take a hot shower. I'll typically stretch out most of the time. Last night was an exception, and I will sort of unwind a little bit, and I'll take CBD oil around that time with some magnesium. And again, it seems to help out. It's been a big help to me over the years, and I can tell the difference when I stop taking it versus when I'm on it. And so again, my encouragement to you is if you've heard about CBD, if you've tried other CBD companies, that sort of thing, try out Charles Webb's product, see what it does for you, try it for a month, see how you feel on the particular supplement, and then make your decision from there. If you go to their website at charlesweb.com, the promo code is Chewjitsu30, CHEWJITSU 30, and you can check out whatever it is that you want. Get a discount on it, try it out for a month and see what kind of effects it has for you and see if it helps your training and helps your recovery. Also, thanks to my buddy Matt at Epic Roll. He is currently, I guess, gearing up to help out with the PGF tournament, and Epic Roll's involved in that. If you guys haven't checked that out, be sure to check out my buddy Brian McGaffron's PGF competition. It's gonna be fun, and it's exciting to see. And with that said, if you guys want to check out some of Epic Roll's gear, again, I'm a big fan of what he produces, a big fan of the gear that he puts out. I have my Jiu-Jitsu stuff made from it, like the rash guards and shorts. I also have my gym stuff made from it. And again, if you go to his website at epicrollbjj.com, browse through what the selection of stuff that he has. And if you want to get a new t-shirt, rash guard, shorts, gis, whatever it might be, he's got it, everything there at epicrollbjj.com. The promo code, if you want to save a little dough, is Chewjitsu, CHEWJITSU 20% off the order. And again, you'll get excellent customer service, and you'll get a great set of rash guards and shorts, or a good t-shirt, whatever it is that you're interested in. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by strolling on over to the Patreon website, patreon.com/the Chewjitsu podcast. And when you guys go there, you can sign up to join the Patreon that we have to support the podcast. It's very inexpensive. And then for that inexpensive price, you get a monthly update of content that can be everything from warm-up routines and stretching ideas from Eugene, seminars that I've recorded, rolling narrated rolls that I have that have never been released, talking videos that have never been released to YouTube, just a ton of different stuff that we've been collecting over the last few years. And it's available to you in that library on the Patreon that you can scroll through and enjoy. And again, you can unsubscribe at any time, but it supports the podcast, and you'll have access to basically, I think it's what at this point we're talking about, to almost 6 years worth of, getting close to 6 years worth of content.
Crazy.
That's wild.
Isn't it?
It's wild. So it's there for if you want it. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Also, if you guys want to get my daily email, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, CHEWJITSU.net/join, JOIN. When you guys go there, you will then be prompted to sign up with your email address. And when you do, I will send you a couple free ebooks. One is on developing a jiu-jitsu game plan. The other one is helping you with some drilling strategies to get the most from your training through focus, especially for you guys that are training a couple days a week or 3 times a week. You've got to be incredibly focused with your training. And so the ebook could be helpful to that. It can help you get the most from the training. And it's something that I do personally. It's something that I use. And it's also some strategies that I use with my students and how I teach. And so again, if you guys want to get access to that, then go to my website, chewjitsu.net/join. Once you get those ebooks for free, you will then get my daily email, which can go into everything from philosophy stuff that I'm reading, different books that I'm reading, books I'll share sometimes, ideas that I think are useful for training, diet information that sometimes I find useful, whatever it is that I want to share with you. It's kind of like the YouTube channel plus, right? Like I share a lot of stuff in the YouTube channel, but then this kind of goes a little deeper. It's like the same thing with the podcast. You hear all the stuff in the podcast. In the email, it gives me a chance to go through a short little email on some particular aspect of training or lifestyle with you every single morning. And you can get it there again at chewjitsu.net/join. And so with that said, guys, let's jump into this podcast with Chad. How's everything going on your end, bro? Like, what are you up to these days?
I've been pretty good. So I got my rib cut out last year, and then I was dealing with the problem where if my arm was raised up, it was pretty much cutting off all blood flow. So I went to the doctor, and they said that I didn't have a pulse when my arm was raised up.
Right.
So it makes sense with a lot of stuff. When I was training down at your gym before I moved here to Tennessee, I started getting to where I felt like I was going to pass out.
Mm-hmm.
I had one of the doctors there, Mike, he checked me out and was like, yeah, your pulse is like everywhere. It's very sporadic. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go to the doctor. I'll just tough it out and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Like every other jiu-jitsu guy. So I started going, and then I did a tournament. I was reaching up. I had the guy in a triangle choke, and I was pulling like this, and I was like, man, I feel like I'm going to pass out. And I got like this weird feeling like I was just, I don't know. It's almost like everything got into slow motion on me.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was going to pass out. So I turned and then got tapped, walked off the mat, just sat there for a second. I was like, am I having a heart attack? Like,
yeah.
What's going on? And it was the pain. It was like right in the chest area on the left side, which is what they tell you normally.
When you have a heart attack.
You have a heart attack. And
yeah.
I was like, I think I'm having a fucking heart attack. I was like, so I walked off the mat and I was like, and then I tried to keep training. And then started getting worse as I was rolling. I'd roll one round and I have to sit down. And I was like, damn, I feel like I'm going to pass out again.
Yeah.
Randomly, I was holding my neck like this because I was super sore. I had thought that I broke my neck, and I was just rubbing my neck. And this guy walked in the gym, one of my purple belts now, and he was like, "Hey, I'm a PTA. Let me check you out and see." He's like, "I can at least give you the right direction, hopefully." So he kind of just checked me out, and then he was like, "I think you might have thoracic outlet syndrome." He's like, "Obviously, I'm not like a PT. He's like, just from experience doing this stuff. He's like, you might want to go get checked for this."
Yeah.
Went to the doctor and did a bunch of tests, and like, yeah, you have thoracic outlet syndrome. So, and then I got lucky enough. So some people get the artery one, and some people get the nerve one, and I got both of them put together. So.
Well, what's interesting is because this was probably I don't know if they build up over time or whatever, but I remember, there was a point where you did several tournaments where it was like we just thought you had bad cardio because you would go out and you would have these matches where you'd have these people literally dead to rights in a submission or whatever. You'd be killing them, and then it would just like all of a sudden you would just stop. And then you would like flip over and they would get the better of you. And I was like, man, Chaz has got terrible cardio. What is going on? And it's like, well, no, it's like you had this condition that was a problem because, I remember you complaining about some of that stuff where we had talked about this, where you were like getting freaked out by a sensation when you were rolling sometimes or when you're in competitions. And then, like you said, then it progressed toward the point where, then you're literally having no blood flow. You're getting ready to pass out. And, again, it's one of those things where it doesn't make any sense because you were in good shape. But I don't know how those things work. So what exactly, Eugene, I'll ask you because you can probably explain it better than you, Chad, or I could. What exactly is thoracic outlet syndrome?
So it's basically like Chad explained. It's like you're getting some kind of occlusion. Something's compressing the blood flow. So like compression, like blood flow, or something's stopping the blood flow.
Those big words and make sure we're dumbing it down for the knuckle draggers in here.
So, and Chad talked about, surgery sometimes is, usually a last resort. They'll check, and they may have checked your nerve function, like what your nerves, like do like little electrodes and possibly check if your nerves are working properly. So essentially, like, a lot of times you raise your arm up, or like we do a test where you raise both arms up and you kind of open and close your hands, and you see if you start losing sensation or discoloration in your hand. So for some reason, like the nerve, or I'm sorry, the rib, the first rib that Chad's talking about goes up, and somehow it starts to impinge and decrease that blood flow, or even in his case, the blood flow and the nerve supply. So you start getting numbness or weakness in your arm, and it's on his left side. So yeah, you're like, oh, am I having a heart attack? I'm getting lightheaded. What's going on?
All the signs, right?
All the signs. Yeah. So it's weird that, like, you've dealt with it for so long, and it can sometimes get better, but sometimes it does not, and you do require some.
And is that something that progressively gets worse and worse?
It can. It definitely can. And like, think about what we do in jiu-jitsu. We're always rounded forward, we're shrugging, and so there's basically some of those muscles attach into that,
and they pull it up.
Yeah, and you're basically getting that.
So it's more of like it's basically a muscular imbalance issue that then is pulling that rib up, right?
It can be, and some people, that don't do jiu-jitsu get it, just from sitting, like postural.
Well, but I'm saying, like, but if they're haunched up all the time,
I think it definitely puts you in a compromised position for sure.
So the surgeon actually came down halfway through my surgery and told my wife, he's like, it's gonna be way longer than we expected. My rib for some reason grew like 3 times the size of what it was supposed to. So just fertilizing over time. So it started out like when we were talking about it, when I was going to the tournament, saying like, man, I just don't feel good. Like, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't put it together. My hand was changing colors. Like, one hand would be ghost, the other one would be like bright purple. So it was pretty much blood pooling. One shoulder was trying to take blood from the other side to try to even it out. But yeah, it just kept getting worse. And then over time, I just kept cartilizing more and more and more. And then eventually I got to the point where I had to, you can look at some of my videos, I had to start putting my arm on my belt and just teaching like that. So messed up at that point. I couldn't even use my left arm anymore, but I could not figure out what it was. And then finally I figured out what it was. I tried every single thing I could. I tried acupuncture, went to physical therapy for a year. Pretty much anything you can think of, I tried it. Worked, but it was just because my rib had grown so big that nothing was gonna make up for that.
talk about maybe overcoming the injury, like even mentally. Obviously physically you can't do what you love doing. You have to modify your training, modify your coaching. Mentally, how was it getting through that? Like kind of still being, you're still in your prime. You're a young guy still. I know you say you're about to be 30, which, I'm 40 and Chewy's 39. He's pushing almost 40. What was that like for you? How did you kind of get through that little bit of a tough time, just not even feeling like you're getting better, not having a resolution, and just trying to kind of still have a grasp on jiu-jitsu and have kind of that connection to jiu-jitsu, because you're really a leader at your gym and everybody kind of looks to you as well.
Yeah. So first when it happened, I was kind of disappointed because I was like, man, I'm in here training with my guys, and when I was rolling with them, I felt like I could give them a lot. And for some reason, I didn't feel like my teaching aspect would help them as much as the rolling aspect of me actually getting to roll with them. So I had to change my perspective on that a little bit. And we actually won a lot more matches when I was out, because I was specifically like, I was on the sideline the whole time just working on people and working on their games and helping them get better. But for me personally, I was depressed the whole time. I was like, yeah, this kind of not like super depression, but I just like bummed out kind of, where I'm like, man,
Of course.
stuff anymore. And every time I would come in, I would try to do something, and then it would take somebody like just grabbing my gi and just like barely pulling it, and then I'm like, it's happening, like screaming out. I'm like, yeah, I felt like my neck was broken. There was a strong pinch feeling. I was like, well, that's all. Every time it would happen, I was like, well, that's all over for me. Like, I'm done. And I actually went to the doctor, and they told me, the first doctor I went to was like, oh yeah, it's allergies.
What? How?
Doc,
Like,
every time this guy grabs my gi
My arm goes
and pulls
numb.
it, my arm goes numb. Oh, sounds like you got a case of the seasonal allergies.
What the
yeah,
hell?
like, I don't think it's allergies. Like, I think my neck's broke. And I was like, I think I'm about to pass out all the time. I was like, can't be allergies. He's like, well, just try 6 months on this allergy medicine, and then we'll see how it goes. So that's actually why I sat out longer trying to figure out what it was. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe because I am a little bit like, I overthink everything.
Yeah.
Like, shit, maybe I'm overthinking it. And it's just
Yeah, you're a
out.
bit of a hypochondriac like I am. But then there's sometimes where both of us know that something is legitimately like something's up.
Yeah. So I was like, maybe I am. So I waited 6 months, and I was just hurting the whole time. And I was like, and finally I was like, all right, like something's really up. But it's not allergies.
Doc, I'm not breathing just fine right now, but I still can't stop passing out every time someone grabs my neck.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
um,
was setting out the rolling and everything, and then I just started coaching each person in the room. Like, each day I'd pick somebody new and be like, all right, I want to focus on this guy and get him really good. That way he's going to be able to roll and perform. And then we started just like killing it at tournament. We were already doing pretty good, but I could see like people's game was elevating. They were starting to get more crisp with their techniques and stuff like that. And it just made me plan more. So it made me a way better coach. And then when I came back to too, I had so much time to think about stuff that I wanted to do. It kind of gave me like a fresh start. So now that I'm back to rolling and back to training, everything that I was teaching, I put new ideas in my head that I'm like, okay, when I get back, I'm going to try this because it seems like it could work. And it's always been something for me where I can kind of just piece stuff together pretty well. So as I was teaching and showing stuff and watching people roll, I'm like, I bet they could do that. And then I would get out there and roll. And I'm like, there we go, it worked. So I actually created some new like passing techniques and stuff like that just from watching my students roll and kind of really digesting the game from being out on the sideline.
yeah, being out that long, it definitely forces you to change it. And here, the thing I think is interesting is I think this will become more and more common where as all of the aging like warriors and competitors, start to age out of the ability to compete. Let me kind of go back a little bit. There are people that would compete till they literally can't do it and their bodies are completely broken. I think for most of us, we enjoy competing, and I think you're probably the same way, but we also want to be able to function later. We also want to be able to like be on the mats and move around as we get older. Yeah. And so therefore you have to, really adjust your training, and you can't just say, I'm just going to push through this. And so, with that said, I think that, we'll get more and more to this thing where we don't expect coaches to be like the hard in the middle of the trenches, warrior type guys, right? Because a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, that's what we always kind of have experienced, and that's what we kind of expect is to be, you know, as the coach is coaching the class, we want him there with us kicking our butts. But with any other sport, the coach is on the sidelines telling people what to do and directing things. You know, they're not in the middle of the training session competing against their athletes, because we don't expect that. It doesn't make any sense. And so I think we'll see that more and more in jiu-jitsu, and it's not a bad thing, but it definitely changes the dynamic as far as your training goes. Tell me about this. So I know that, you know, obviously I follow your stuff when that's going on. And I remember seeing a few of your guys come out there, and, you know, you'll post a couple little clips or highlights or whatever. And it looks like you got like a little competition squad, the Hardy Hit squad. How did that whole thing come about, and what's going on with that?
Yeah, honestly, I can't remember who came up with the name. We were just kind of playing around, just joking around, and somebody was like, Hardy Hit Squad. I can't remember, or I would give them credit, but they said Hardy Hit Squad, and I was like, that was pretty cool. I was like, so I just started, one of the kids' dad, Asher, his dad, a lot of cool stuff, and he made me this logo, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. So we just kind of ran with it and stuck with it. And then for the tournaments on Smooth Comp, so my gym name is Guardian Mixed Martial Arts, but the person before us had made the account, and it was on like a completely different team, so we weren't getting any points for it every time we were competing. So I was like, we'll just go with the Hardy Hit Squad when we do the local tournaments, or the tournaments that are on Smooth Comp. And then for IBJJF and stuff like that, we'll compete under Sean. But for the, we want to be able to keep the trophies and whatnot. And the team trophies, so we can keep them here. So we go under Hardy Hit Squad.
Nice.
I do have a few black belts and brown belts that are under me that are in the Army and stuff. So that when they compete, they'll compete under the Hardy Hit Squad name.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a fun name. You know, it's a fun name, fun little thing going on there.
Yeah, the little logo that Chris is his name came up with. Really good. I mean, he's a phenomenal. If you ever need some work done, logos or any stuff like that, he's the man to go to. He's done it professional for years, took pictures on the red carpet and all kinds of stuff. So dude's a pro.
And his son Asher, I remember watching him at the competition that we had here in Louisville, the Jiu-Jitsu Open. He was great, man. He was a little killer.
Yeah, he is. Reminds me of when you were teaching me.
Why is that?
Just you start thinking back and you remember, or you get like the flashbacks of memories of stuff.
Yeah.
Some days you'd be going a little bit easier. I'm like, I'm gonna get his ass today. I was gonna tell same thing with me. I'm like a little tired, getting worn down, and he's like just coming at me a million miles per hour. But I love it. He helps out with a lot of stuff here. To help out with kids classes, just like I did. And he comes in, does the adult classes, does the striking classes. But man, he is gonna be a monster when he gets older. I mean, he does nothing but jiu-jitsu and study and train. So looking forward to it. And he's only been training like, I think he's at almost 3 years now.
Okay, yeah, he's looking great.
He's came a long way. I mean, I've watched the kid. I've took him with me to seminars, and he's tapping out purple belts as a yellow belt.
What's funny is for any of you guys listening, if you go back on my YouTube channel and you just go like watch some of the because there's plenty of old videos of Chad and I rolling. Probably, I almost imagine almost every one of those rounds we were rolling, as soon as we would like slap fists, you know, slap hands, bump fists, Chad and I would lock up, and Chad would usually whisper to me something to the effect of, "I'm gonna fuck you up, old man. Like, you know, I'm gonna mess you up real bad today."
Yeah,
it would always never fail. You know, I was like, "Oh, here we go." And when he was a kid, to what he was talking about, like with Asher, I remember there was a point where right around 15, 16, I remember when we'd start rolling. Sometimes I would kind of go easy a little bit on him, you know, because when he's 14 and 13, you just do whatever you want to with him. He's got good technique, but he's too small. Starts to get about 15, 16. Then it's all of a sudden, I remember like one of the first times he caught me, he was doing a underhanded grip armbar. So it wasn't the traditional like hand over the top. So it was a very sneaky armbar. And I remember he caught me in a damn armbar. And I was like, son of a bitch. Like he just caught me he legitimately caught me in an armbar. You know, I mean, I wasn't going full speed, but at the same time, I wasn't giving it to him. And then now I'm like, all right, I gotta start watching it. All of a sudden you start feeling that. And then it just continuously got worse. And then now like you know, if he's healthy, I'm just fighting for my life, you know. So
yeah, I got a little roll with Chad when he was at our promotions. That wasn't fun. I was like, we're just gonna move around a little bit, you know. I was like, I don't know, like he had surgery, so I don't know what to expect, you know. Chad, I like Chad, he likes me, I think. And he proceeded to beat my ass.
it's how he shows his
and then
love.
afterwards, I was like, all right, screw that guy. I'm going after him. I don't care. I'll probably get messed up anyways, but I'm not. You were actually one of my first rolls when I came to the gym to Derby City. I remember. And it was kind of like a stalemate. I think I had you in my guard or something, but I was like, who's this kid, man? What the hell? Like, this shouldn't be this hard, you know? And I don't know what belt you were. This was in 2010. And
2010. So you would have been you were a blue belt by then?
I don't think it was blue
or
belt.
orange.
I think I just got my blue. Yeah, I can't remember, but I remember you had a green belt on.
I had a green belt, and I think you were offended by me having a green belt. And it was literally my first. But I don't think you had a blue belt at the time, because I was like, oh, whatever.
Could have been orange then. I know because you had a blue belt by 2011. You had a blue belt.
Yeah.
But I remember we're just like locked up in guard. I think I had you in my guard, and I couldn't do anything. I was like, what the hell? It's this kid, you know? And then it just remember seeing you kind of at blue belt, and you would win, you know, you won worlds at blue belt. And then I remember at purple belt, we did like this in-house tournament, and you were purple belt, and you smoked everyone like in the gym. And I was like, that was competing, and I was like, oh, okay, Chad's kind of arrived. He's kind of cut, you know, turned the corner. Now it's like, you know, you started to really kind of see like your body. You were older, obviously, and had all that skills, and everything started coming together, I think. What was that like for you, kind of just starting to like really come into your own, like, you know, at purple belt, starting to, you know, and you beat some higher belts, of course, as a kid as well, you know, 14, but as you started to get purple belt and up there, how did you kind of start to continue to grow your game and kind of take on the role? Because then you started to coach as well, like take on the role as more of a leader.
Yeah. I always have my friendly shit talk to people when I roll.
Yeah.
What I do. I think it was a little bit more aggressive when I was a teenager. Like when I rolled, it was like super just hard. Like I was not like trying to hurt you, but I was going like 150% every time. I know when I started teaching, I started getting more respect when I was calm. Like when I would calm down, I wasn't just trying to beat the brakes off people. It kind of discourages them a little bit when you're going 150% on somebody new. So when I got when Chewy put me in charge of helping out with the classes, with the white belt class and stuff like that, you just see way more retention if you were nice to those people and you weren't trying to kill them when you were rolling. So my perspective changed a lot. And then just some talks with Chewy and some of the other guys at the gym too. Just staying humble was the most important part. When you're a kid and you can literally beat almost everybody in the world, it's a crazy feeling, but you got to remember that you're human at the same time, and stay very humble and down to earth, which helped me out being around you, Chewy, Chris Dukes, you know, just a lot of older people that were doing well in life, kind of attributed to me being where I'm at this point today. Because I could have just as easily, I came up in a really bad area, I could have just as easily hung out with all the people in my area and been in a really bad spot. But I had good influences in the gym, which is what I try to do with my gym as well. I try to keep good people around that are doing well in life. That way I can lead this younger generation kind of on the same path that I did, even if it's not jiu-jitsu, to have good role models to where they can look at in life and want to do their life rather than some of the stuff that you could be surrounded with in life.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing sometimes, because there's not a lot of places in society where you can have, you know, for men and women, but, you know, again, for us as guys, right, there's not a lot of places in society where a young teenage guy can be around men that range from 20 to 50 and be able to gain experience from them and be able to talk to them and sit down and have these conversations on a very like personal and like connected level. There just isn't a lot of that, you know, in society, because a lot of the communities and things like that existed for men at some other time, just they're not around anymore, right? And so I think it's a cool thing that, you know, obviously women are part of jiu-jitsu too, but I'm just speaking from a man's perspective because that's all I have. it's cool that, because I had the same thing. I got into jiu-jitsu and I had all these people around me, all these older guys who had different perspectives and ways of being that I've never seen before. Because again, we both grew up in a rough neighborhood. So it was really eye-opening. And then it sort of gives you that there are other possibilities to life that you didn't know existed because you were around them. I think one of the things that I noticed, like one of the big changes that I noticed in you, or when I noticed it in you, was, it's really easy for people who, let's say, for instance, if all you do is train jiu-jitsu, or all you do is this thing, right? It's very easy to look at those people and be like, man, you're just lazy. You need to work harder. You need to train harder. You need to do whatever, But like the older I get, the more you start to realize that the toughest opponent's usually life. And life is just anything off the mat, right? That's usually your toughest opponent. Because again, if all you have to do is train all day, that's really not that friggin' hard. And when you were just training, it was no problem. I remember when you first got when you had a full-time job and you're working between 40 to 60 hours a week. I remember then you're coming into the gym, you're a little bit more tired, and you started to have empathy for a lot of the older guys that would come in after a day's work. And you're like, oh, this is what you guys feel like when you guys come in here and you've got this, and you had this 16-year-old kid who's basically barking at you, ready to smash you. And I remember it softened you a little bit. And like you said, with that humility, that humbleness came more people than the classes grew, because they're like, oh, this, we're connected in that level. You're not basically treating us as if we're professional athletes. But then even going back to your story about the thoracic outlet syndrome, right? We were just saying, hey man, this kid's got bad cardio. You need to work harder. You need to train harder, whatever. It's like, no, he didn't have just luck of the draw.
Yeah.
He just had a friggin' rib that started getting bigger. He didn't plan on it. We didn't know that it was happening. And, you would train hard, whatever, but then you're still running into those problems. And I think that sometimes like people can think, oh, I'm just really lazy. And like, maybe you are lazy. I don't know. But I think a lot of times we have these situations that come in front of us that we have to work through. And sometimes that process of working through doesn't look so sexy and great. And like you had to take time off from going hard into something so that this way you could eventually come back and do it again. But, I just think that when you had some life experience, the more life experience that you've had, the better of a coach you became, the better of a, connector of people that you've become, because you can appreciate what they're going through. If someone has an injury, you can appreciate like, hey man, I was off the mats for like a long time because of this thing. If they're coming from hey man, I'm working 60 hours a week. Hey, I feel you. I did that too. You have those experiences opposed to someone that maybe comes from a very sheltered position who's never experienced any of that. It's very easy for them to disregard other people's problems because they've never experienced it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And to that point as well, like I'd always just been in the gym. Even my first job was working at the gym. So I was like, the only thing that I knew was jiu-jitsu and was be a champion and try to be a world champion or whatever my goal was at the time, a UFC world champion, pan champion, all that stuff. So it's pretty much all I knew. And then once I started working, like you said, the reality of the life hit. And I was like, dang. And then as I got older, I got the thoracic outlet. I ended up getting married, and now I adopted my 2 cousins as well. So now we have kids, and yeah, just stuff happens. And when I used to see people, they were like, oh, they're only coming to class because like once or twice a week because they got kids. I'm like, you could come more than that.
Right.
But I now understand. I'm like, it takes a lot. And luckily my wife is able to get them to some of their activities that they want to do and stuff like that, because I have to work at the gym and stuff. But yeah, I definitely see how life gets a lot harder when you got to work and you got children that you need to attend to and need to be around to, have their father around, have their mother around, or whatever it is. So
yeah,
definitely, I relate to people a lot better by having those experiences compared to when I was a kid and just trying to run everybody to the ground so they could be the best in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're younger, you probably need that ignorance, right? You probably need to exist as if there is no limitations and you can just go hard, whatever. Cause sometimes that's what it takes. But when it comes to, say, if you're coaching a gym that has people, like let's say, for instance, people that are not just professional athletes, having that life experience is important because it gives you the ability to empathize with them and to know where they're coming from and actually connect with them. Because again, if you're going to run a gym, one of the most important things is that you actually connect with people, because people will come to you for your techniques for sure, but they will stay because they feel connected to a group.
Yeah.
We all want to belong to something. We all want to feel like we have purpose within a bigger community of people. And so if they feel that, it's great. And if you can't connect with those people because you're just a hard ass who, it exists like they're 19 years old and all they have to do is train all day, and that's life, and that's all anyone else needs to do, it's going to be hard for them to fit in. But if you're like, hey man, I know what that feels like, I've been there, you give them ways to proceed within your community, within your training, that still accommodates them. Hey, you can only make 3 days a week, no problem, man, we can work around that, we can make it happen. That's important.
Yeah, 100%. That's kind of the way that I've built my gym, just from seeing your gym and then looking at other successful gyms that I've been to, their atmosphere that they built. That's the same thing that I wanted to build. A lot of people say like the family motto, and some people think it's like, it's cliche or cult, but we really are like a family. Like we all go out to eat together. You'll see pictures of us like 40 deep in restaurants going out to eat. We'll watch the fights together. We get big teams together. We got group chats going, like all kinds of stuff. So we all stay connected. If somebody needs help, we're right there helping out whoever it is in the gym that needs help. So we are like one big family, and that's kind of the atmosphere that I wanted to build, because I wanted to be able to walk into a gym and not one, I didn't want to feel like I had to work every day. I wanted to be around people that I wanted to be around and happy, which is what I said. One of my mottos is, I'm not going to give you a black belt unless you're a good person. Good person just means you have a good attitude, you're not very negative, and you can inspire other people to be great as well. So that's one of my mottos for getting a black belt here at the gym. And some of the black belts that we have, it's amazing. I think we have I think we're coming up on like 20 black belts at the gym, and all of them are great. We have police officers that are black belts, and they're leaders in the community. They help out with a lot of stuff. And then just your average black belt that comes in training, same thing. They're respectful. They'll help out anybody. Somebody brand new comes in, they're the first person that comes up to them. They're like, hey, how's it going, man? Let me help you out. Let me drill with you. Let me show you this technique. Compared to, we're just going to stick them with some other new guy in the corner, and hopefully they figure it out. We got people that want you to come into the community, want to help you get better at this stuff. And that's kind of what I love about my gym, all the way from the kids class to the adult class. Just great communities with both of them.
So I want to kind of ask you about building your gym, because initially I don't know what the plan was for you. You had met, your now wife, and you were still in Louisville, kind of doing the long distance thing for a while. And then you're making a decision to drive, to move kind of closer to her and maybe train. I don't know what the plan was. Can you talk about kind of your idea, starting in a new gym? What was that like for you? First of all, kind of training at, Derby City for most of your life, growing up on the mats with us, being there with us and kind of beating us up a little bit. And then, deciding that, hey, I want to be with this person. I want to move, to a different state, train there, and kind of create a gym and an environment that I want to be a part of. What was that kind of whole decision and process like?
Yeah. So my now wife, Leslie, she was part of the Team Sean Hammond's association. She came down to train at our gym because we were an affiliate of Sean's. Down to train. And she just wrote me and I was like, hey, is there anything to do? And I was like, yeah, there's Thunder over Louisville going on. So I was like, me and my roommate Brian, we were going. I ended up hanging out with her, and then she drove down to Louisville like for a year straight. And I was like, man, you're not going to find very many people that will do that. And she was like, hey, I have to start college and I'm not going to be able to come down as much. I was like, well, I'll move there. So I ended up moving here. The plan was to train and be a competitor and, continue the path that I was on there. Like I taught at Chewy's, but I was like, I'm going to not teach anything. I'm just going to be a competitor and move. But, plans changed when I got here. There wasn't as many competitors as I thought there was going to be. Actually, my first day of training, kind of getting off to a different subject, not different subject, same story. But my first day of training, when I did move down here with Leslie at Guardian, this dude headbutted me like right in my head. And then I took him down, and then you could just tell in his eyes, there's a certain look in somebody's eye when they're like actually trying to hurt you or trying to mess.
Yeah. You could feel it.
Yeah, I feel it. He was like just like trying to hurt me and grabbing me. So I just grabbed him by his throat, and I was like, bro, we can turn this into an actual fight. I was like, I'm just playing with you. We're just doing jiu-jitsu right now. I was like, I can actually beat your ass if you want. And he was like, whoa. I was like, I didn't mean that. And I was like, you fucking headbutt me in the mouth and then trying to hurt me. I was like, I can feel you trying to hurt me. And then it kind of calmed down. I just like walked away from him. I was so mad that day. I was like, I'm not even going to train anymore. So I actually left and trained at a different gym. And I was thinking about signing up with them. And then Leslie talked me back into going back to Guardian. And I was like, all right, I'll go back. And then Sean ended up asking me to teach the classes here. Started teaching a lot. And I was like, well, if I'm not going to be a competitor, I got to do something with this stuff. So I got to open a gym. So I ended up buying this gym, and then I kicked out a ton of people, and then started building the atmosphere that I do have a Guardian.
What was that with that guy? You don't have to be specific, but how did that pan out? Was he still training, or was that something that still kind of
anymore?
No,
kind of quit a few months in, but yeah, just a bad attitude.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of goes back to that thing. It's like where you got to train 150% all the time, which I'm completely fine with. You know, if me and you are having a hard roll or I'm coming at you, that's different. Like when I came down to Louisville, I was rolling hard with you, but I wasn't intending like ripping your arm off or
no.
I could tell like if he got something, he's gonna break my shoulder, or, like really try to injure me. It was just the feeling I got. You know, I had that look in his eye, and I was like, all right, like if we're gonna go to that level, I'm fine with it. But I'm just letting you know it ain't gonna end well for you. Like I'm gonna hurt you. So,
yeah. If someone listening, if you've never felt that before, let's say if you're new to jiu-jitsu, you haven't felt it before, it'll happen. You will have a roll with someone where, you know, and until your spidey sense goes off, you're rolling with them, and then all of a sudden you get a weird vibe from it. Their body, the person's body, that's very tense and rigid. They may be breathing a certain way. They might look at you a certain way. They might have a bit of anger or a very stern face looking at you. And then if they catch you in a submission, you realize you're in like way more danger than you would normally. And it's a weird feeling. There's a thing to me where a lot of times when you're training with someone, you can sort of get a feel for what's going on with that person internally through their body, because again, we internalize so much of our emotions in through our bodies. We think of our emotions as like being trapped in our head and like expressing them, but like when you think of babies, if babies have something that bothers them, what do? They throw temper tantrums. They have these behavioral examples. Their face changes. Their body gets all rigid. And they'll cry, whatever. Well, adults do it too. Like we get stressed and our shoulders get really tense, right? As an example. And so you roll with someone and you can tell kind of what their intention is at times. You're like rolling with them and you can feel this rigidity in their body, their tenseness, or you feel them grab onto something. And it's not in a very technical way. It's very much I'm going to grip and rip kind of way. And those rolls typically, like Chad's saying, they're not fun. It's fun to go hard with someone where you can go really hard. And, you know, in the, like, for instance, you know, me and Chad have had this happen many times together. Same with Eugene. Maybe we're rolling and maybe I headbutt Chad. I'm immediately saying, hey, you good? And almost always, you know, he's fine. He's like, yeah, I'm good. Keep going. And then we just keep going, you know, but we're still going really hard. But at the same time, we're always kind of checking in on each other, because that's jiu-jitsu very much is a singular sport, but you can only get better with your training partners. And if you break all your toys, you have nothing to play with. So, you know, just for you guys that are listening, if you've never had that experience yet, you will at some point, and just be mindful of it.
Yeah, it's usually when visiting gyms.
Yeah,
I've had that too. Yeah, like visiting a gym and like they're basically like, oh, you're this rank or you're trained at this gym. I'm gonna set an example here. Like basically they're trying to like protect their turf essentially. And it's, you know, it doesn't have to be that way. Like you even said, you know, having a visiting black belt come to your gym, and it's almost like I'm gonna take the head off the leader kind of thing, and just so I can kind of say, hey, that, you know, they're this or they're that. But I think it's such a, like we talk about, ego is not a bad thing. Everybody has an ego, but it's like having a healthy ego. And that's just like, you know, trying to push somebody down, put them down just to make yourself feel better. It's never.
Well, I think it has more to do with like, what do you feel like you have to prove? I mean, because that's really what it comes down to. You know, as young men, when we're coming up in our teens and early 20s, we roll like we have something to prove, right? I mean, that just is what it is. And we do have something to prove because we're trying to prove ourselves to our group around us. But eventually you get to the point where, what do you have to prove? Especially like when you guys, like for instance, a guy coming in to train with you, if you said, like when we were talking about earlier, hey, I'm injured. I haven't been trained for months. I just had surgery 3 months ago. Could you chill? Like, why are you rolling hard? What exactly do you prove to yourself by, even if he was able to submit you, by submitting a black belt who just got back from surgery and they're not 100%, do you feel good about that? Does that make you want to go home and be like, oh, I submitted Chad today. He just got off surgery and he just had his first day back, but I submitted. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And again, it goes back to that idea that practice doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you have this chip on your shoulder that you have to win, there's nothing wrong with winning in the gym, but if you feel like you have to win, go compete. That's what that's there for. But in the gym, it's like where you can train hard and you can compete against each other, and it's competitive, but the competitive element is not the only thing that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's why jiu-jitsu is so cool is, most of the time when you build this trust with somebody, it's because when you're rolling with them, they're not trying to hurt you. So I got to put 100% trust that if I let you practice a submission, that you're not just going to break my arm or do it like really hard. So you build like this unique bond with people on the team. I just had this conversation with my guys after training one day, because guy kind of went a little bit too hard on the submission. I was like, hey man, I don't want to be on the same team with somebody that I know is trying to hurt me. It's like, you're not you kind of become my enemy. I don't want you to be my enemy. I want us to be on the same team. So we got to form this level of trust and form this bond with each other to 100% trust that you're not going to hurt me when I come out here and train. And that's what I consistently try to preach to everybody too, because you get a bunch of young guys that come in that have all wrestled and they're all trying to like lift each other up and slam each other and stuff like that. I was like, you got to realize the consequence of that sometimes. It's like you slam somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. One, they either quit because they're like, damn, this guy's an asshole, he's trying to beat me up. Or two, they get hurt. So gotta keep them in line. Be like, hey, this person's only been training a little bit. Or if you're going with one of the females and it's a bigger wrestler, and like go instantly stop them. And then to the other point is, if you feel like you're in a role where you just don't like it, just learn to be like, sorry, that's it. That's the end of the role. I don't want to roll anymore. Except don't be scared to do that as well. I've talked to some of my older students like that. They're like, well, this guy's coming at me. I was like, just tell him you don't want to roll with him anymore.
Yep.
Told him, and he's like, why don't you want to roll with me? He's like, because you're trying to hurt me every time. He's like, I'm 60 years old, man. He's like, coming at me. Realize, they're like, oh, shit, I didn't even look at it like that. Sorry. And then normally that helps calm them down. And if it doesn't, then just don't roll with them anymore. Let them go with the young guys and let those guys roll with each other. There's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay to cherry pick your partners depending on the situation, right? If, like you said, and again, it goes back to the thing, like some 20-year-old wrestler maybe not have had any injuries in their life. So they don't know what that's like to have someone injure them that puts them on the shelf where they can't train. The minute that happens, they roll completely differently because they have empathy now. Like, oh, that really sucked. I don't want to do that to someone else. I mean, unless you're some sociopath, right? But I think kind of something, a reoccurring theme here is for a lot of you guys that are training, unless there's some sort of policy against it at your gym, it's okay to cherry pick sometimes. If you're 45 years old and you got a busted neck and you've got like some 22-year-old college wrestler who just came in and he's full of piss and vinegar and he's ripping headlocks on everybody, that might not be the best person to roll with. And if he comes up to you, say, hey man, I can't roll with you because my neck will get jacked up and then I won't be able to train tomorrow or next month. And if you're a small person, like a rooster weight, you're like a tiny person, and Big Bubba, who weighs 300 pounds, comes up to you, is like, hey, maybe we don't roll with that guy. Maybe we say, hey, I'm gonna go find someone that's a little bit smaller, because if you breathe on me the wrong way, my leg might snap. That kind of thing.
Yeah, you can't let your ego get the best of you, because sometimes I see like a really big guy walk in the room, I'm like, oh, I gotta roll with that guy. So like, wait, my neck's hurt. I don't need to roll with this big 300-pound dude. It's like, I can't. Because
you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Ego's. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should do that. And I'm like,
it's risk versus reward, And Chad, I want to ask you, man, do you have any fun? You used to make some fun videos at the gym, by the way. That's something we can chat about. But like, we've talked to you about you as being like the mat enforcer when you were a kid, being a mat enforcer at the gym, because you weren't very like, you didn't look like somebody that could, handle a grown adult and kind of tie him up in a pretzel kind of thing.
Especially when you had the Bieber haircut.
Oh yeah, you had the Bieber haircut. That was wicked.
Killer Justin Bieber at all the tournaments I went to.
So, do you have any fun mat enforcer stories? You saw somebody, Chewy always shares some of these, but do you have any fun experiences like at the gym, being a young kid and kind of just like putting somebody in their place?
Oh yeah, all the time. It's kind of one of my favorite things to do because I really like fighting. Like fighting is amazing to me. Just always loved it. So when I would see somebody going like really hard, or if I'd see him like beating up one of the women, I would just look over and be like, all right, this dude's getting his ass whipped today, and I was gonna 150%, and then just let them know, be like, hey, that's what it feels like when you're doing it to other people, man.
Yeah.
Kind of put them in their place a little bit and be like, hey, there's bigger fish in the pond, and there's people that could do the same to me, but I'm not doing the same. I'm not doing what they would do. They're going out there picking on the women or picking on the smaller people just because they're bigger. And I think that's a relative theme in every gym. Somebody will come in, and you have to have somebody that's your big brute enforcer that can just put people in their place and be like, that's not the way things need to be, and be this way. Otherwise, it gets a little chaotic, and then that person invites their friends, and now you got a whole gym full of people that are assholes, and
Right.
gotta cut the cord on that really quick and make sure they know this is the way that the gym needs to go. So that's why I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it not only because I was able to fight and go 110% like I loved, but I also knew that helps keep the atmosphere at my gym good. So that's why I really loved being the mat enforcer. It wasn't just beating people up. It was like I know enforcing like the atmosphere that needs to happen at the gym in order for us to keep growing is why I really loved it.
Well, and you think about because this is something when I talk about the idea of a mat enforcer, we live in a very soft society and everybody's like, just talk to them, tell them to be nice, whatever. It's like, that just doesn't work all the time. For many of you guys who have never been around especially young men, we're freaking stupid. We're just, like, young men are just dumb. We just are, right? Like, this is the thing. Like when you read about books, for instance, when they talk about, hey, there's a hill that we need to take over here, and we need a bunch of people to go take it who aren't afraid of dying. It's like young guys like, we'll take it, let's do it, right? And they just go up there, and I mean, it's just whatever. We ride motorcycles too fast and we're just stupid. Most of the time, like when you look at like the reason for male deaths, we'll say like minus suicides, all self-inflicted dumb stuff, right? It's like you're killing yourself because you're doing dumb stuff. Anyway, with that said, understanding young male stupidity, as I very well do because I was one of them, you realize that, again, it goes back to this idea of giving experience. We don't understand things until we experience them. It's so easy to talk about things, but it's so hard to really understand what that's like until you've experienced it, right? You just can't. You can't possibly understand sometimes what things actually feel like until you do it. So when Chad goes in there and he's an enforcer, when you have your big brute that puts the smash on someone because they were like putting the young woman into a washing machine during the roll, right? Just like throwing her all over the place. What you're doing is you're saying, hey, this is what this feels like. Now, we can do this to you to every roll, but maybe when you're going with the smaller people, you back off a little bit. Because obviously, if you're going with someone your own size, you won't be able to just manhandle them as easily. But maybe when you're doing that, you get that experience. And it's like, oh, and sometimes it gives you that aha moment, just like we talked about with you with your light bulb moment of, hey, I'm working 60 hours a week and I've got kids and this is pretty damn tough. Those guys that were coming in back, man, it's a little bit tougher than what I expected it to be. You have contrast, you have experience. And so, for people that, when they hear these enforcer stories, oh my God, you're not enforcing and hurting anybody. You're giving them an experience so that then you can say, hey, treat people better and let's have a good time. And again, they either conform or they don't. One of the things that we used to do at Chad, though, that out of the way with kind of for fun, was if there was a guy who was kind of whatever, I would usually give Chad a wink. And it didn't happen very often because usually guys come in, they're most of the time pretty cool, but every now and then, one of the ones that I remember the guy was just so stupid. It was this guy that came in. He was a military guy. We're really close to Fort Knox. Military guy came in with this couple buddies. I don't know if you remember this guy. And they would go into the cage during classes, and they never did any. This isn't something that would fly now, but basically they would come in and they would just, whenever there was a little bit of space over in one of the mats that was open, they would just go over there and practice with each other. And it was a guy who was no better than a no stripe white belt, who was getting ready for an MMA fight, who was then training, air quotes, the other 3 or 4 guys, or other 2 or 3 guys that he was rolling with. And I remember talking to one of the little cronies. I said, you guys want to come train on the mats with us and like learn something? And they're like, oh man, this guy, I think his name was Keen or something. So they call him, oh man, Keen, he's amazing, bro. He's so good. And I remember looking at this guy, telling him, no, he's not. He's not good at all. You guys yours is so bad, you don't know the difference. And so I was like, how do you don't know the difference between filet mignon and a hot dog if you've never had filet mignon, right? Yeah. So they're just training with this guy. So anyway, the guy Keen or whatever, he gets on the mat. And I remember he was training, and I was talking to him because he had an MMA fight. I said, hey man, just talking to him, seeing where his head's at. And again, it was very, very boastful about how good he is. I'm okay. So I remember I rolled with him. Terrible. But obviously I was a, 200 plus pound black belt. So, maybe you can chalk it up. Well, he's just a black belt. So whatever. So there was Chad with his Bieber haircut, probably weighed about $140. So I just gave Chad a wink, and Chad nods. And then he went over there, and Chad wasn't mean to him, but he proceeded to triangle the guy like every 20 seconds on the second, just over and over and over again. I mean, the guy was he just couldn't get his head out of Chad's crotch. And then after it was over, I remember coming up to him at the end of class and say, hey man, how was that? How was your rolling today? And I remember all of a sudden the excuses started to pour out. Oh man, I'm cutting weight. I'm this, I'm okay. So at that point, you just know this guy's never going to be back. And he wasn't, he never came back. Yeah. He fought like a week and a half, or it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, and he got massacred because he shouldn't have been fighting. But, amateur MMA fighting is what it is. But sure. He goes out there and fights, whatever he fights. But I remember seeing that. And again, what you're doing at that point is you're saying, listen, either conform and start training with us, or this place isn't going to be for you. What do you want to do? And again, that's an idea of an enforcer, but that was one enforcer story I remember, which I think was fun.
I think my favorite story, I just remembered one as you were mentioning.
They start coming back, yeah.
I was like, the memories start coming back. So I was doing an MMA class, Ferguson brothers, when they were teaching. Both of them fought on the Ultimate Fighter. So we're teaching class, and this new guy came into class and wanted to try it. And they're like, all right, let's spar. So we started sparring. I'm pretty tall. Like, I'm 6'3", got really long arms. So I was just like jabbing. I wasn't jabbing hard, but enough to keep the guy away from me so he couldn't hit me. And you could tell he was just getting super frustrated because I was so tall. Like, he'd probably never been punched before either. So I was hitting him. He started like throwing these haymakers, and I was like, and when you're sparring, if you sparred long enough, like sometimes people punch like really fast, but they're pulling them.
Yeah.
So I'll let this guy hit me and just see like if he's actually trying to knock me out. And I just stood right in front of him and let him hit me. And I was like, if you hit me like that again, like, we're really gonna be fighting. I'm gonna mess you up. And then as he was like, oh yeah, fuck you, blah blah blah. And I was like, all right, man. I was like, here we go. So I was beating him up. I think it was you were in class and you kind of pulled me off of him. But his wife was like, they got lucky. That guy saved that kid.
Yeah. It reminds me of if anybody ever watched like Mad TV back in the day, there was a character that one of the guys played where basically the guy would get into some altercation with some random person. I mean, it was over the stupidest stuff, and he'd start pushing on him. You want to go, man? You want to go? And then the guy would just sort of fall to his ground and sort of like pat him on the on the legs, and he'd call him like, you want to go, turkey? And he would fall to the ground, and then the girl would be standing in the background. She's like, Ron, stop, you're gonna kill someone. And again, everybody else is looking at him thinking, what the hell's going on? This guy's like touching my leg. It's not scary at all. And so it was that kind of thing where you had this guy where again, I don't know if you came in with the right attitude. You came into a fighting gym trying to fight a young killer. Probably not the best way to go. I think my favorite one was you putting the big Marine guy to sleep. So there was like a 250-pound guy. I probably told the story before. Guy comes in, again, just, big attitude. He's a big lifter type guy. And then, he rolls with Chad, goes to sleep from a triangle because he didn't want to tap. And then we all had to go wake him up. Well, what happened? You didn't tap out. You got choked out by a 14-year-old kid. Like, lose the attitude and just, train, and let's be cool and let's have fun instead of coming into it. It's just, I think what made Chad the good enforcer part was because he wasn't the brute.
Right.
And so it was a very clear idea. As soon as you rolled with Chad and you got your butt kicked, you could not blame it on he's older, he's bigger, he's stronger, nothing. You literally had to just say that, man, this kid's really good. He's really technical. This jiu-jitsu stuff's very powerful. And at that point, you come to grips with you're either going to have to submit to the art and submit to learning, because there's a submission that takes place. You have to say, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Teach me, right? That's a part of it, right? You have to submit to the person there. You either have to submit to the training and the teaching, or you just aren't going to fit in. You're not going to belong here, because otherwise the young kid is going to kill you every single day if you don't basically say, I'm now going to try to learn. And I think it was a great way to like clear things out. Because again, a lot of people have that experience in jiu-jitsu where you get beat by some smaller person, some kid, which is the cool part about jiu-jitsu with the idea of like rolling with different weight classes and stuff, because you can have that experience and big guys can come in and roll with smaller people and they realize they can't do anything with them. And it's such an eye-opening experience. And it usually only goes one of two ways. Either, oh my God, this is a magical power, I need to know this, or yeah, insert whatever excuse you'd like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we've both seen it too, with just the numerous amounts of gyms that have shut down, and mostly it's always the gyms with people that have been kicked out of other gyms. They all get together, like, oh, let's start this gym, and it's just filled with ego and a bunch of people that want to hurt each other and like go 150%, and that gym never ever works out. Like, you know, I've been training for 20 years now, and I've seen gyms come and go, and the ones that have the family atmosphere that are keeping people in and keeping people involved, like you said, and the ones that are like, oh, I'm just going to build fighters, we're just going to be a fight gym, and like that, those places always, like, they can't make it longer than a few months. So that's the other thing, is people don't realize how hard it is to actually run a business as well. It's like those dudes don't want to pay anything either. It's like, oh, I'm going to come in, I'm going to fight for the UFC, so I can train for free, right? It's like, well, like, you're not even close to fighting in the UFC, man. It's like, it takes you years to be able to even get to where you might be able to fight in the UFC. It's like, you got to train for years to be able to get to that level. They're like, oh, so I can train for free? No. It's like, we got to pay the lights. We got to keep everything on. It's like, everybody has to chip in so that we can all do this thing that we all like to do. So, but with the fighter gyms, a lot of times, most of them don't want to pay. Just from over time, seeing that's a big thing. So I try to hurry up and weed those people out, or just let them know, like, hey, this is the way that things are going to work here. It's not going to work run your own program type deal.
Yeah, and it would be different if a lot of those younger guys, let's say, for instance, let's say they didn't have a lot of money, if they came to you and said, hey, listen, I really want to be a UFC champion someday. I don't have a lot of money to pay. What can I do to help you? I would love to train her. What can I do for you to help out? What can I do for you possibly? You know, I think sometimes people will see someone, say, you know, who's a UFC fighter as an example, right? And they'll see that they have sponsorships, but they fail to look back and say, well, this person trained for a decade before those sponsorships ever came. No. You don't get to start at day one and have sponsorships. You know, I see that sometimes I've gotten messages from people that are white belts. They just started like, you know, a year ago, and they're competing a little bit. And they're like, hey, like, you want to sponsor me? Why would I sponsor you? I mean, like, again, sponsorships are great if there's a reason. You know, if you came to me and said, here's what I think I could offer you. But I think sometimes, especially now, people just think that you're supposed to just get sponsorships because you won like a Naga tournament, or because you think that you're going to be the next UFC champion, regardless of whether or not you've trained. And again, this is not how civilization works. This is not trade. You know, again, you're asking for something without giving something in return. And even if you're an experienced athlete who's got a lot of credentials, you'll get a lot more feedback from people, or a lot more response from people if you say, here's what I could do for you. And, you know, so I think that's why those things, you know, as you said, as business owners, a lot of times people, I was talking about this the other day with some of the students. Someone said, like, they didn't mean it in a bad way. They were just like, oh man, it's like, you know, teaching jiu-jitsu for a living. Well, whatever. I'm like, well, teaching jiu-jitsu for a living is not really what I do. Yeah. That's one part of it. But I said, it's kind of like the iceberg idea, right? What you guys see is the tip of the iceberg. There's so much other stuff that actually consumes more of my time during the day that is not me on the mats training with you guys or teaching. There's a lot of other stuff. Teaching is a very important part. Being on the mats is very important, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. And, you know, a lot of people don't ever see it. So they don't understand. And so it looks easy. It looks easy to open a gym. It looks easy to run a gym. But until you've done one, it's not so easy. There's some difficulties there and some things that you have to be aware of. that people they don't know because they've never experienced it.
Yeah, it's tough. Somebody was asking me just the other day. They're like, "Hey, what are your thoughts on opening a gym? Can you tell me everything?" And I was like, "Here's the first thing that I tell everybody," and it's not to discourage them. It's just kind of be like, "Here's the reality of like what it's going to be. Otherwise, you're going to be in some severe trouble." Everybody who wants to open a gym is like a blue belt. Well, rent here in my area is about $12,000. So, I mean, and most of the time you're signing a 5-year contract. So 12,000. What is that per year? That's 100 and
Yeah. Do you have over 6 figures a year? That's not counting the heat, electric, and everything else. But do you have over six figures a year just to stay open, just to stay afloat, right? And then if you actually want to make any money, right, then that's a whole different ball game. But just to be around, you're talking about low 6 figures. It's a lot of money.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's kind of, I kind of not got lucky. I worked my ass off to get there, but also I lived with I lived with Brian, and like we had like 5 different roommates, and me and Leslie lived at her dad's for a while until I got everything going. So it takes a lot of sacrifice in order to start the gym, but you just got to know you're not gonna you want to know your overhead right away. Otherwise, you're putting yourself into a dark hole. And if you get, and I've seen it, I've seen guys have to sell their house and they lose everything because they're trying to start this, because they go in there like, oh, I'm just going to start this. I'm just going to teach. People are going to come in the door, and everything's going to be gravy from there, making a shit ton of money. I'm like, that ain't how it works, man. So I try to be realistic, and I tell them I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm just letting you know this is the reality of the situation, and I don't want you to go in there with a blindfold on, and then you're like, oh, people aren't coming in the door. You got to know how to get people in the door. You got to know how to relate to people. Like you said, a lot of stuff goes into the business aspect of jiu-jitsu. I don't get to come in every day and just teach. I got to do stuff behind the scenes too. I got to keep your members happy, talking to your members, and a bunch of stuff.
Well, again, both of us, you and I, are both very lucky, right? But I like the idea of luck being opportunity meets preparation, right? Because there's always every successful person has an element of luck, right? Like, for instance, you look at people that, let's say Bill Gates. Bill Gates grew up in a place that just the high school that he so happened to have he went to just so happened to have this computer that he had essentially unlimited time to program. If that had not been there, he probably wouldn't be who he was, right? The person was Warren Buffett. I remember he had a speech to these college kids, and he said that if you were born in America this year, you had a 1 in blank chance, I forgot what it was, to be born in America. Congratulations, you won the lottery, right? And so we're all a little lucky if we're successful. The difference is that, again, everybody at some point, life throws them a ball, it throws them a pitch. You may not get a bunch of them. Some people get more than others depending on their circumstances, but we all get a pitch thrown at us, right? And then we have to take the swing. Yeah. But we got to practice, right? And so you think about that when you were younger, right? The only reason that you could take advantage of the opportunity that you had at Guardian started back when you were a kid and you stayed focused, because obviously kids your age when you were a teenager, they were going in different directions. They're drinking, partying, doing other stuff. And you were like, no, I'm going to go train. I'm going to do this ththing. I used to go pick you up from your house every day. You didn't have to go along with that. You could have been like, I don't want to train tonight, but you got in the car and we went and trained. It was fine. All these things. And then later on, I remember when we had that conversation and you were a brown belt and, basically said, essentially you're not going to play the game of societal trappings and working just to buy stuff. And you're going to basically live like a Spartan for a while to figure things out and be full-time. You made that decision. And again, you're now going a different direction, because then you're getting into your early 20s and your friends got jobs, they're getting out of school and they have money, they have stuff. And then you're looking at yourself going, I don't have any of that stuff. And it again, from the societal standpoint, makes you feel kind of bad, like you're doing something wrong. So you're sacrificing and you're focusing on this thing that you have. And then, 11, how old were you when you got down to Nashville? Like what, 20, was it 6, 27?
I don't know. I think I was pretty young. I can't remember. It's been
25, maybe. It was like, what was it? Was it 2018?
I think so.
So so that's a long time. It's crazy. So about 6 years ago. So 6 years ago, you get down there. So we're talking about over a decade worth of focus. And then you're teaching classes. You didn't even want to teach classes at first. You just wanted to focus, but you're teaching classes because you got good at it. And then an opportunity comes your way to buy the gym and you take a swing and then you're making the best out of it. Right now you're working your tail off. And so again, there's like success, obviously there's hard work and all that stuff. But again, it's just being focused on doing all the work on the back end before anything comes your way. And then this way, when an opportunity shows itself, you're ready to go. And I think that, you know, sometimes people, again, kind of going back to this idea, people maybe see you now. Some guy might see you now, some student of yours might see you now and say, oh man, I want what Chad has. It's like, well, are you ready to go put in like a decade worth of work that basically you don't have anything to really show for except for some medals to then have that opportunity? If not, then just don't worry about doing this, because that's not how this thing works.
Yeah. One thing that, from owning the gym and just seeing it over time with you is you get people that just want it and they want it like right now, but that's not the way that martial arts works. It's like you got to become a master at this stuff, and it takes a lot of time to become a master before you're able to teach and own your own gym. I mean, you can be a blue belt or a purple belt, and I'm not saying that it's like a terrible thing, but there's still different levels to the game. And most of the time what I've seen, with the exception of a few, the blue belt gyms, they're smaller gyms compared to this gym I've grown, and it has I think almost 300 and something members, 300 plus members. You know, it's just, there's levels to the game, and when you take time to learn all the different levels and learn the mistakes of different gyms and learn the advantages to the gyms and what they're doing, and you can kind of piece together your own thing, I think it really helps compared to just jumping in with a blindfold and then you're like, well, we're here and now everything's falling apart. So
yeah. Well, Chad, I know you gotta run, brother. I know you're pretty short on time. So if people want to follow you or get a hold of you or see what you're up to and train with you, where can they do that?
They can train with me at Guardian Martial Arts, Mixed Martial Arts, Guardian MMA. That's in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. There's actually two Guardians. There's a Guardian Lebanon, and then there's a Guardian Murfreesboro. I'm at the Guardian Murfreesboro. If anybody wants to come train, they can follow me on all my stuff at Chad the Beast Hardy. It's the same on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff.
Awesome, brother.
Good chat with you, buddy.
It's good to see you, man. Good talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. So at the time of recording this, it is my birthday. I'm turning 39. And I think as I reflect, I keep thinking about this idea, like we talked about with Chad today, about how, again, you know, when you're younger, you don't actually have experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you get older, you start to have experiences. And that's really where you can actually understand things. Because, you know, we talk about stuff, but until you felt it, you don't know. You don't really understand it. You know, it's like there's a lot of people out there that they'll talk about things and they explain them, but they've never experienced them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't. For instance, there was a historian. I think it was Stephen Ambrose, and he was writing in one of his books. He was basically paraphrasing here. He said that you can teach, talking about like World War II. He's like, you can teach young men how to fire guns and, you know, walk around, whatever, and do the things that soldiering requires. He said, but you can't teach them how to basically have to put their head down and they're having shrapnel and artillery fire over top of them. You can't teach that. You know, and I remember reading, there's another good book that was a memoir written by a guy who was a Marine during World War II, during the island hopping campaigns. And during one of the first battles that he was involved with, where they're basically landing on this beach, it's like an atoll. So it's this very coral and just rough beach that he gets there. He lands on the beach and he's in this landing craft, this amphibious landing craft, and he's landing. And so it's an open, there's no roof or anything. It's all open. And he's just watching, like he talks about a shell coming down, hits one of those landing craft, and you just see people and everything just obliterate. And he said it was just it's such a numbing moment. You're seeing it and you just can't quite explain it. Right. And so you read that and you're like, I can't understand what that's like and what you're experiencing. I don't have any visceral response to it. Now you can think about it in less gruesome terms, where like, say, you'll hear someone say, hey, money's not everything. And if you're broke, you're like, whatever, bro. And obviously money means a lot, but there is a point where you start to realize like, oh, well, like at what point is money going to make you happy? Right. Like it's not like money can make you happier and things. Right. But material possessions are only going to do so much for you. Right. And so you only get that once you get it. You only understand it once you've experienced it. And I think that a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, it can be kind of an experience that where, you know, we can talk about how to deal with nerves. You can't understand until you've done it. Mm-hmm. You know, we can give you some guidance, but you still have to go through it yourself. Like when you go to your first jiu-jitsu class, you can look at people and you can look at them and it looks fairly easy. They're just rolling. And then you get out there on the mat and you're all of a sudden wheezing within 2 seconds of rolling.
Yep.
You didn't think it was going to be that hard, but you never experienced it. And so I can't tell you, like telling people to relax. Well, I can give you guidance on that, but you can't relax until you've experienced it. And you've actually tapped into that experience to know what it feels like to just chill out. And so it's just an idea to chew on to wrap this one up. But one of the things that I've seen Chad, seeing as a grow up from a young man, as I've seen him as he's matured, his level of experiences matched with his empathy and his ability to connect with his people and, again, be with them wherever they're at. If he's got a young guy who just is biting at the bit, like his kid Asher, he was like, I know what that's like. I can meet with you. But if he's got like a 40-year-old guy who's working 60 hours a week and's got a couple kids, Chad's like, hey, I know what that's like. Let me help you out. And I think that's important because I think sometimes, people that just like eat, sleep, and breathe jiu-jitsu as coaches and whatever, sometimes they can be very like heavy-handed with their treatment of people because not everybody's supposed to live on the mats. And sometimes I've seen guys where they like leave gyms because they feel like they're getting pushed out because, if you're not there 5 days a week, the coach is like, why are you being so lazy? They got life, bro. They got a lot of stuff going on, and it's tough.
Yeah. I think jiu-jitsu is super important in different ways for people, for
It's different for everybody.
Yeah. If you're a hobbyist with a family, jiu-jitsu holds a certain importance to you versus someone that is, on the mats 5, 6, 7 days a week. And they use this as a way to, maybe compete, or it's a livelihood for them. I mean, it's a lifestyle to everyone, but in a different way. It's part of their lifestyle in a different way. And I think that Chad's kind of lived a lot of those it's almost like he's lived numerous lives on the mats.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like as a young kid, first of all, grow up, then like full-time training, then going to like, all right, now I'm a business owner with a family and like I'm trying to balance everything and also dealing with injuries. So he kind of he's worn a lot of these different hats and he understands kind of what people have gone through in these different stages, like you said. And I think it's an advantage because you've lived these different lives, almost like 3 different lives in jiu-jitsu, and you get to connect with people because you've lived it.
Yeah. Well, that's like Joseph Campbell's work. He talks about that idea of the death and the rebirth. Yeah. So, Joseph Campbell's work, if you guys aren't familiar, it's The Hero's Journey, is a very popular one, the monomyth. And essentially he took these different motifs that are in all these different religious stories and different tribal stories and mythological stories. And then I identified them and we're like, well, here they are. And there's one particular myth or story arc that gets used over and over again. And it's typically known as the hero's journey. Right. Yeah. And to his thinking, that the reason why these were baked into these stories were because they were trying to tell us, ancient people with wisdom, experience, are saying, because you can think about this like Aesop's fables. We can a lot of times embed lessons into stories better than we can advice. Someone tells you what to do, you're being told what to do. You tell them a story about something, you get led to the idea without them ever telling you what to do, and you come to the idea yourself. That's why stories are so powerful, right?
Yeah.
Like again, you watch something on the news and they tell you a compelling story. They're not telling you to be angry. They're telling you a story to make you angry, or whatever emotion they want you to feel. Most times it's news, it's angry. But there were these screenwriters that talked about this idea of using this. And if you look at every major Hollywood movie, they basically, almost all of them follow this story arc. And there was one guy when I was listening to this audio program, he was talking about, you can watch a movie and with a stopwatch, and you can literally watch it to where it's very formulaic, that these changes happen at a certain point. Mm-hmm. And in pretty much every movie, there is a death and rebirth. And when the character in the movie is reborn, we want to see a physical change, or there will be a physical change. And we want to see that there is a deep interchange. And when I think we saw Logan together, that's when I just started doing this.
Yes.
And I remember I'm like watching it.
You looked over at me with your watch. I'm like, damn it, Chewy.
Yeah. I was doing the same thing to Jess. I remember I was like, hey, baby. I was like, that's the point of no return.
Yeah.
She's like, shut up, watch the movie.
That's right.
But there's a point where if you ever watch the movie Logan, just as an example of the imagery, during the movie, he, for the most part, wore fairly dark clothes. He was being paid like $40,000, whatever, some sum of money to do something, right? A mercenary of sorts. And then when he's going up that mountain or hill, he was dead. He's dying. And then they nurse him back to health. They give him new clothes. He comes out of the room and he's got this bright, fresh white tank top. So the imagery of white, right? It's colored. So, we with the light. And then they try to offer him the money and he turns it down. He says, I don't want the money. So he, at that point, had died and came back.
Mhm.
And then, so where I'm going with this, by the way, is that, each one of us, we experience these little deaths at different times.
Yeah.
Right. And it's hard because there's these points where you, especially when you're young, you come to know yourself in a certain way. And a lot of times it's very pleasant. Like Chad, when he was a competitor doing very well, it's a very pleasant experience. Man, I'm really good at something. I'm a world champion at something at my skill level. I'm, this, that, whatever. And then to have a debilitating injury that no fault of your own, just freaking, you're doing everything that everybody else does. You just bad luck.
Yep.
Right. It's like now all of a sudden life is saying, nope. And, what Joseph Campbell's ideas would have been, well, what they're telling you is that when these things happen, these calls happen, you have to kind of submit to them and you have to go with them. You have to allow that side of your ego to die to make room for who you're supposed to become. And so again, like thinking Chad, had he continued to try to train, he probably could have done serious harm to himself.
Sure.
Right. But then he's like, okay, I've got to go through the surgery. I may not really be able to roll again seriously. So now I've got to move into this role and I'm going to coach and I'm going to teach people. And now he's becoming a different side of himself, whether you think that's better or worse, who knows, but it's becoming a side where he's definitely more mature. He's grown in a lot of different ways. And I think it's cool to see, because again, we all go through these. Every one of you listening has probably experienced a moment where you had to let go of a side of yourself so that you could chase something else or you could grow in a different direction. We all go through that.
Yeah.
I'm sure like when you had when your children were born, you had to let go of certain things.
Oh yeah.
When you get married, you have to let go of certain things. When you get older and you experience injuries and things, you got to let go of certain things. Just, we all go through it. And it's just a useful lesson so that when you reach these turning points in your life, and you'll usually have handful of them, you're recognizing what it is and willing to go down that path rather than trying to resist. Because you see like I see a lot of guys in jiu-jitsu. I've seen a lot of them do this where their bodies start breaking down on them.
Yeah.
And they choose to ignore it. And I'm just going to tough through this. I'm going to push through this. And they keep going. And then their bodies literally just crumple. And then they can't train at all. They can't continue at all because they've done so much damage without saying, maybe my body's telling me something. Maybe I need to back off, and maybe I don't need to be a hardcore competitor at like 50, 45, whatever. Maybe that's not where I need to be anymore. Maybe I need to move into a different space, or, hey, maybe certain things in my life outside of the gym are going a certain way. Well, maybe I need to move in a different direction, whatever it is. Or you even told me about this guy that you said was teaching your kids, where, was some stockbroker guy or whatever, business guy.
Yeah.
And then, again, now he's teaching kids.
Yeah. He's my daughter's kindergarten teacher, I think, worked like pretty high up, some kind of business.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure what he did, but he decided that he wanted to
teach kids,
work with kids, work with little kindergartners and stuff. And he's a phenomenal teacher and connects well with the kids and stuff. And I think he has all this life experience as well that he's able to kind of, I don't know, some way he's been around so many different types of people. I think he's able to kind of work with, I guess he connects with kids as well.
But imagine having to do that where you're like, I'm going to leave a business or I'm going to leave some business position where in society we would look at you a very positive way. Sure. Oh man, you're really killing it. And then, you're a kindergarten teacher. It sounds like you're going backwards, but if that's what you want to do, then that's a better path for you. And, and you're having to let go of a certain side of yourself. Or, there's plenty of people that everybody knows someone who chose to stay in a position or some career that they absolutely hated, but they've already done it for a while. And just for sheer consistency's sake, hey man, I'm going to stay on this path because maybe the money's good. Or, hey, I've got this really nice car and this nice expensive house, whatever it is. Right. And then, but they hate everything about it. They just choose to do it because they feel like they're supposed to, or because they've grown used to the identity instead of saying, hey, I need to back off. And so I think that, again, we all experience it in different aspects. Yeah. But for people like me and Chad, who have dedicated our lives to training and jiu-jitsu, we have a lot more in this arena because of the fact that that's where we put a lot of our eggs.
Yeah. It takes a lot of, I think it takes a lot of guts, man, to do something like that, especially when you guys did it. Because it's very unconventional and there's not really any guarantees. There's no guarantees in making it as a world champion or you're going to be a world champion. There's no guarantees in your gym without really having a lot of knowledge on how to run a business, right? I mean, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to be probably close to closing the doors a couple times. You're going to have to make some hard decisions, but you also have to sacrifice and man, I got to live with my mom, sleep on the on a mattress that deflates halfway through the night, like not really have anything to show for when, it kind of reminds me, you ever seen that movie Waiting years ago? It's got Ryan Reynolds in it.
Oh yeah.
And one of the guys is like a waiter, and this kid from his high school or something shows up, and he's got like this degree in like engineering, and he's like, well, look, and so, and he's like doing this this lifestyle that he despises, that he would never want to do, but the guy's got all this money, and he's like,
so he feels like he should want it.
He should, and he doesn't have anything to show for it, right? Because he's working at a restaurant, but he kind of has this group of people that he loves working with and enjoys kind of what he does. But there's a lot of pressure there too, right? Like just to fit a certain norm, but going against that norm and kind of making something out of it is pretty special.
And I mean, there's some norms that I think are good. Like for instance, if taking care of your damn kids and being a father, being a mother, right?
Things you have to do. Yeah.
Those kind of norms should be pressed, and we should be saying, hey, we should be taking care of our communities, and we should be doing the best we can to serve other people. And I think all those things are really good. The norms that you have to be careful about are the things that are pushed down to you from mainly a marketing standpoint. And as someone that studies marketing, I like studying to I think like training and things like that can do a lot of benefit. But when you're, trying to, for instance, like with cars, I think it was Edward Bernays. He was like a guy, this basically, he was a propaganda guy for the war. And then he got out and he was like, okay, like, I mean, he's literally why so many of these different products became household things, or why, for instance, as an example, cars got associated with male virility. So basically, like, every guy, for some reason, when we're like getting around 18, we want a nice car because we think girls want that. That was the guy that did that. He literally basically all through advertising, where if you go back and look at essentially back in the day when cars were a utility, get from point A to point B. And why would you buy another one if it drives? Because I mean, what do you need one for? If it works, why get it? They're very expensive. Why get another one? Right. Well, so then these companies, like, they're like, man, we need to sell more cars. All right. So we got to give them a reason to. So what's the reason? Oh, we're going to come out with new models. And if you don't have the new model, then like girls aren't going to like you, or what, this kind of thing. And if you look at all the old advertisements, it's not that way. It's different now because of the fact that, the society's equal, and we put pressure on women just as equally as we do men. Right. With all this stuff. But back in the day, it was like, if men were going to control the buying power, it was either because they wanted to have stuff with their family, or because they're trying to chase ladies. And so the cars, all the old ads, especially for like the more sporty cars, were all about like, this guy's just, women just want him because he's got this sports car. And so, if you think about that, like, why is it all of a sudden you think that women care about your car when you're 18 years old and you're going to start becoming an adult? That's your guy. Right. And so that's the reason, right. And so all these things. And so even like you look at some of the terms and stuff that came up. So with what I'm getting at is, again, it goes back to aligning properly based upon what you would like, and if you really want that nice car for some reason, that's fine. But I think a lot of times what we get stuck into is we get stuck into chasing other people's paths that we don't really want, but we see them and we're like, okay, I like that, I'll go that way. And then once we realize we don't want it, we still keep chasing it for some reason, even though we don't want it, because we feel like, hey, we're supposed to, and this happens in jiu-jitsu. People get into jiu-jitsu because they hear so-and-so talk about it. And, oh, it sounds great, I want to do this. And they get into it and they're, oh God, this is so hard. And I hate this. And I don't even want to do this. And I'm not motivated to do this, but I'm going to keep going because Jocko said this. Like, screw that. If you don't want to do it, go find something else you love. Go find something else that, like, and I'm not saying you got to only do what you love, but find something that you find purposeful, that gets you up out of bed in the morning and you like, I really want to do this. If you're like dragging yourself out of the bed every morning to go do jiu-jitsu, you should probably stop. You should probably go find something that's like, I actually enjoy doing this. I enjoy pickleball or whatever it is, right? Like find something that you're like, this actually gives me some fulfillment to the point where even if I'm not super motivated, I still want to do it, because I know I'm going to feel better afterwards. Yeah. But if you're just constantly you hate the experience, it's probably the wrong thing. And the same thing goes with other stuff, right? If you're constantly rolling and all, like, and because you've got thoracic compartment syndrome, and you're trying to roll really hard all the time and you're freaking about to pass out, hey, maybe we should stop doing that. Right. Or, if you're going into a situation where, like you said, you're a business owner or whatever, and you don't hate doing this anymore. And you're like, I'd rather be teaching kids, but you're like, well, what everybody's going to think about me. Well, so what? Yeah. Like, would you rather live your life and enjoy what you're doing, or just stroke your ego a bit? Yeah.
I think whatever you find purpose in, and that gives you some level of fulfillment. I think that's kind of the main thing. It's not as much. I mean, obviously you got to make money. Money's important to a degree.
You got to make money, but you also got to like not spend money.
Right. And so fulfillment is, I think, like doing something because you get something from it. Like you get some joy, some benefit. Like I think there is. Like I think, I think we get a little greedy with jujitsu even. Like I love to teach. Well, I love to teach because I feel like it feels good to watch somebody do the move that I showed them or teach them something they're able to acquire it and utilize it in some way that's beneficial to them. I think that's but then, I think in jiu-jitsu as well, I get fulfillment from it, right?
Yeah.
There's something fulfilling about, being with people you like being around and also completing something challenging, like a tough training session where you really have to push yourself. And then you're like, you can kind of take that, that relaxing moment afterwards when you're kind of done training. Then it feels good, right? You can't really replicate that in a lot of different ways. And that's a feeling that I think we can get
for you.
For me, it is.
Some people hate that experience.
Sure.
But you love it. And so it's great for you.
It's amazing. It makes I see my day and my life is a little bit through different perspective, right? I feel a little better, a little more kind of, and it's so cliche to say that, but honestly, there's so much truth to it. Like you just feel so much better. Like after a tough day training, you're driving home and like somebody cuts you off. Like we talk about that. I'm like, all right, whatever.
But it makes sense because when you look at the effects of like strenuous exercise, and they've done studies on these now, right? Where like, again, you compare them to like on people that are depressed or people's moods and stuff like that. And when you compare strenuous exercise, in some cases, it can outperform a lot of drugs. So it only makes sense. I mean, it's just one of those things where we see in Western society, we divorce ourselves from our bodies. We're so focused on the head and the brain and whatever else, and you forget this body is really important. And it's all connected.
All those things together.
It's not disconnected. And so, what you do to your body will affect your brain and vice versa, right? And so when you take your body and do these strenuous activities and you make your body move because your body was meant to move. It was not meant to sit at a desk all day long. It was your thing is this whole thing that we have was designed to move. So when you're being rewarded by doing what nature designed you to do. Right. And so again, everything from neuroplasticity to basically boosts of endorphins and everything else, you're giving your body what it needs through movement. And so it only makes sense that you're going to feel better the rest of the day because you're basically high from exercise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, of course you're going to feel great. They've said, I forgot who the guy was, but there was some doctor or something. He said, if you could put what exercise does to the body in a pill, it would be the best selling drug ever.
Successful.
But the problem is just exercise you have to work at, and you have to do it yourself.
It takes effort.
Yeah. And again, what I think comes down to is you have to find the right exercise for you, so now we're getting off into the weeds on the other side, but basically you have to find the right stuff for you because you have to find what you actually enjoy doing. Because, if it's not jiu-jitsu, maybe it's lifting. Maybe if it's not lifting, maybe it's some sort of running or something, because some people love running. They get up every morning and they go run miles. I hate it. I hate it. I like jogging a little bit. I'll run for like 30 minutes. I enjoy like a light run, or light bike ride, whatever, but I'm not ready to go for a marathon.
I'm with you.
And then, but everybody's got their thing. And so I think really it's just like techniques. Your job is to not like, if you're my coach, I'm going to listen to what you say, but ultimately we may be very different. For instance, my game is different than yours. You use some stuff that I've showed you, but you use a lot of stuff I didn't show you or stuff that you sort of figured out on your own. That became your game. Your job isn't to mimic someone and try to be on their path. It's to sort of learn from them, take it in, and then you find your own path, right? You find your own, and go back to Joseph Campbell from earlier. He's, one of his ideas, one of his images is that when you sort of come into your own, whenever you go into a new adventure in your life, right, you're basically coming up to a big forest, a thick forest, and you'll see these different paths going into the forest. And each one of those paths is someone else's. Someone else they already blazed that trail. And you can take that, you can start there, you can take their trail for a little while, but at some point, if you're trying to figure out who you are and being the best that you can and have the best experience in your own life, you're eventually going to have to, take an untrodden path, and you're going to have to cut through the forest, and it's going to be slow, grindy, hard work. But that's where we find ourselves, and that's where we can really experience the best sides of ourselves. It's by eventually veering off the trodden path and finding our own experience through it.
I agree.
And guys, with that said, big thanks to our sponsors for helping bring my bearded voice to your ears.
Yeah.
Charlotte's Web CBD. You can check them out at charlottesweb.com. Again, fan of CBD, If you'd like to try out the products, go to charlottesweb.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu30, CHEWJITSU. I use it more from a recovery standpoint. I use it later in the evening with my hot shower at night when I sort of wind down for the evening. I find some benefits from it, and I think a lot of people do. So again, check it out. And if you'd like to save 30%, use Chewjitsu30 at checkout. Also, thanks to my buddy Matt at Epic Roll for supporting the podcast as he has for a number of years now. Again, I get my gym like rash guards and shorts and my jiu-jitsu shorts and rash guards made through Matt because I think he does great work. I think he puts together really good stuff. And if you'd like to check out any of his shirts, shorts, rash guards, gis, whatever he has, he also basically anything jiu-jitsu related that you might possibly want to wear, he probably has it. And you can go to his website at epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order, and you can check it out there. Also, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, we have a library of content that's been building up for the last 6 years, and you can go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast to access it. Again, in the Patreon, there's everything from warm-up routines where Eugene has walked people through stretching and different exercises to target specific muscle groups to the body that are useful for us as jiu-jitsu practitioners to be loosened up and to be strong and activated. This is not very sexy stuff, but for a lot of you guys that would like to roll longer, you would like to not be broken, you would like to avoid injury, this stuff's really important. And again, it's not very long. Most of them are like around 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so again, 20 minutes that you can do a couple times a week can go a long way. Speak from experience. Doesn't mean you're ever going to be crazy flexible, but we can be protected. And again, it's more of a preventative thing. There's also a seminar recording that I have in there where I've recorded some of my favorite competition moves for gi and no gi, and then show them how they work both in gi and no gi, because they're essentially the same moves. I like doing that sometimes because, a lot of people say, well, Chewy, how do you move one technique from the other? Well, I show how to do it in that particular seminar. And there's a ton of stuff in there. And again, you can get access to all of it at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And guys, last but not least, if you would like to join my daily email and get the Chew Crew email that I send out and join the thousands that read the email every morning or evening or whenever they get it, depending on what part of the world they're in, you can go to my website, chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you join up, you will get my daily email afterwards, which goes into everything from jiu-jitsu training ideas to God knows what, because as you just listened to in the podcast, I read a lot of books and I find a lot of ideas really useful. And I think a lot of times ideas from different parts of existence all sort of interconnect. There's different ideas that you can take from one place to another that I think are really useful. And so I share a lot of that through the email. And again, you'll get 2 free ebooks for joining up. One is on building a jiu-jitsu game plan. The other one is on how to do some active forms of drilling and different versions of drilling to get the most from training. Stuff that I find useful, both from a teaching standpoint, but also from a training standpoint, whether I was a coach or a student. And you can get access to that at my website, chewjitsu.net/join. And so, guys, with that said, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. Hope you enjoyed the episode with Chad, and we'll talk to you next time.